Hi and welcome to today's tutorial. I'm Lisa and this is the OhSewGecko channel. Today we are sewing the As You Wish bag from K.Dill Handmade. This is part of the Marathon Society's sewing marathon, so make sure you check out all the other videos that are being released today with this As You Wish pattern. I'd like to say thank you so much to Kathy for allowing me to sew your pattern today. I had a really good time sewing it and I learned some really new techniques, things that I haven't done before, so thank you so much for that. Let's have a look at this bag. So I've done mine in quite a nice bright red cork fabric and it's got a lovely black accent, and I don't know if you can see, so I've done some red stitching along the accent here and then black stitching on the other side, which worked out really, really well. So for starters, it's got this lovely front flap here. Now, if you wanted to, I've used a magnetic snap. If you want to, you can use a turn lock. The instructions are in the pattern for you to do that. It's a really good size bag actually. I don't know if you can see, maybe put my arm there, so from the tips of my fingers to the middle of my arm, it's a really nice size. So obviously it's a crossbody bag, it has a crossbody strap, but it's on the larger size, on the larger side of a small crossbody, if that makes sense. So you can get lots and lots of stuff in here, but without it feeling too big. So it's really, really good size. I have deviated from the pattern a little. So we'll start by showing you. Now the first thing is that the pattern calls for 1 inch or 2.5 centimeter hardware. I actually had this really lovely brass hardware left over from the Gecko Box Winter, which I wanted to use. Now this is a 3/4 inch hardware. So we've got D-rings, lobster clasp. Yeah, they are 3/4 inch, which is 2 centimeters. So they're ever so slightly smaller, but I think they work really nicely. I was really happy with the way they came out. So that was perfect. So my strap is 3/4 of an inch, not 1 inch, but I think it works really nicely. I do prefer a thinner strap. Looking inside, let's have a look. So the first thing is we've got this lovely, oh, come around this way, slip pocket at the front, which is really, really big. Obviously it's the entire width of the bag, and height wise you can just see it's really deep. Inside, lots and lots of space, really roomy. Now there are instructions to do an inside zipped pocket, which I have chosen not to do today. The idea is that you turn your bag through the zipped pocket. Now, because I haven't done the zipped pocket, you've got two other options for turning your bag through at the end. There are instructions for a drop-in lining, but for today, I've actually left a gap at the bottom of my lining where the gusset joins, and I've turned my bag through that way. So if you don't want to have the internal pocket, you don't have to have, there are other options there for you. So we've opened the flap here, we've got our inside, we've got our front pocket, and then at the back here, where the flap is, there's a little secret pocket here. And again, it's really big. It's almost like having two insides to your bag, so two areas, which is brilliant because I don't know anything like me. I drop my phone in and I drop this and I drop that and then I can't find things. So for me, I would definitely, my mobile phone would go in this one, the flap goes here, and it's almost like a secret compartment, so making it extra safe. That's what I think. On the back, turning it around, we've got another zip pocket, and say if you've done the one inside, I haven't done that one today, but there is a zip pocket on the outside. And again, it's really big. It's really, really big. Again, width of the bag and incredibly deep, so you can get loads and loads of stuff in there. This is, it could be a confident beginner friendly pattern. There was really nothing too complicated on here. Keep your interfacing out of your seam allowance, and it's most definitely domestic friendly pattern to sew. I really enjoyed it, and my machine behind didn't struggle at all on any of the thicker layers. It was perfectly fine. It was quite happy. Yeah. So if while you're watching you are enjoying my tutorial, please give it a like and don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on any future videos. But for now, let's sew this As You Wish bag. So for today's tutorial, here are some of the things that I'm going to use, possibly. So I've got my fabric scissors and a rotary cutter. I'm using a rotary cutter because obviously I'm working with cork and I find the rotary cutter so much easier to use. Again, because I'm using cork, I've got some clips. If you're using a different fabric, you might want to use some pins. Obviously you can't use pins on cork, so I've got clips. I've got a ruler, mine is in centimetres. Obviously the pattern is written in inches, but inches, centimetres, you just need a ruler. Some thread snips, a seam ripper. I always need a seam ripper no matter what I do. Right, I've got some normal Gutermann creative glue. I've got this glue, which is a sew line one, which is really great, especially when you're doing zips. So I've got that one. I've got some double-sided tape in 2 different sizes, which I may or may not use. We'll wait and see what happens. And then I've got a variety of different marking tools. I've got a pencil, I've got a, there's this one, air erasable marker. This one is chalk and this one is chalk as well. These ones that have the little wheel on the top, you cannot use these on the front of cork because it will mark the cork. So if you're going to use one like this with the chalk and the wheel on the end, make sure you only use it on the back of cork fabric, don't use it on the front. And then, if we need to, if you're going to add rivets, you might need a rivet press and a hole punch as well. So let's look at our pattern pieces. So this is pattern piece A, which is the front flap of the bag. Mine's in cork. I love this red cork. And I have already added some Decaville light to the back of that. And I've cut it a little bit shorter all the way around. That's to keep it out of the seam allowance because I don't want it to get too thick and bulky. Pattern piece B, we've got 4. So I've got 2 outer, again in red cork, and 2 lining fabric, which is this lovely Curiouser and Curiouser, I think, from Tula Pink. So love this one. So I've got 2 outer, 2 lining. The linings have already been interfaced with a non-woven interfacing. It's quite a light one, it's not too heavy. And then again, because they're my outers, I've lined them with Decaville light and again kept it out of the seam allowance. Pattern piece C is the front slip pocket, bit fluff. So I've got 1 outer and 1 lining. Now my lining is interfaced again with the light non-woven interfacing. My pocket outer I have not interfaced because my cork is quite thick. Don't know if you can see that. And I'm a little bit worried that with the outers and everything else that it's going to start to get a little bit thick. Since this is the pocket on the front, I'm not worried about this being not strong enough, so I think it will be fine. So I am not interfacing with the Decaville light on my pocket pieces. So pattern piece D is the back lower pocket. Again, I've got an outer and a lining. The lining is interfaced, the outer isn't. Pattern piece E is the back pocket lining. So again, interfaced with the light interfacing non-woven on that. There is no outer piece for this one, it's just the lining. Now, pattern piece F, I'm going to turn sideways. Which way up does it go? It actually goes this way up, I think. Yeah, it's this way up. But we'll turn it sideways so you can see it. It's quite a large shape. So this is pattern piece F, and it's the full lining panel. So again, interfaced with the non-woven interfacing. It's a little bit creased because I folded it up earlier. It'll be fine, it'll be okay. Put that over to one side. Pattern piece G is the gusset. So we've got 1 lining, interfaced again, and then we've got an outer, which I have interfaced with Decaville light because obviously it's going to go all the way around the base of the bag, and we need something to give it a little bit of structure. So some extras, I've got here some pre-made cork strap. Now in the pattern instructions it says you can use seatbelt webbing at 1 inch. Well, because my bag is red, I wanted to go with something that black that's a contrast, and I happen to have this particular pre-made strap which came from the Gecko box winter. I had some left over, so it'd be really nice to use that. Mine is actually 3/4 of an inch, which is about 2 centimeters. So what I've done is I've actually changed the hardware. The hardware in the pattern says 1 inch, 2.5 centimeters. I'm actually using 3/4 inch in this nice brass. So I've got 2 D-rings and 2 lobster clasps there. And I've got my 2 cork straps here. One of them is 28 inches, which is about 71 centimeters. And the other one is 40 inches, which is just over 1 meter, but 1 meter would work absolutely fine. In the pattern, it actually tells you that you need 2 other lengths of webbing to create the strap, but because I'm doing mine a little bit differently, I'm not going to use those today. So to start off, I'm actually going to do some decorative stitching on the strap itself, and the other one will just use a different colour thread just to make it look really pretty. So I am going to swap out my black Gutterman thread for some red, just as a little bit of extra detail. And I'm also going to do a magnetic snap as the closure for my bag. If you wanted to, you could switch that out for a turn lock. So we're also including a 10-inch zipper with a zipper pull attached. 10 inches is about 25 centimeters, and this is a number 5 zipper tape. And also 2 zipper tabs. I've used my outer fabric, and they're 1.25 or 1.25 inches, which is about 3 centimeters. So starting off, we're going to start with the outer gusset piece. So this is the one already interfaced with my Decaville light, and I've got my webbing, or for me, cork strap, which is the one that's 28 inches long. So this is the one that's about 71 centimeters. Okay. And then I've got my 2 D-rings, so mine are 3/4 inch, 2 centimeters. If you're following the pattern, yours will be 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to find the midpoint of both of these pieces. So nice and easy, let's fold it in half. Squish that there. Let's get a chalk marker. I'm going to use this one. I'm just going to mark here on the back. I can tell this is the back because you can see where it's been folded in already. Let's find the midpoint of this as well. And cork tends to leave a crease, but we'll use a chalk marker anyway. Let's find our midpoints. Oh, we also need to find the midpoint of the length. Make sure that we are lining up correctly. Let's line up our center points and also lining up on the length. Now, I can't use normal clips on this because obviously it's quite wide, so I'm going to use some of my double-sided tape. Squeeze that down. There we are. Peel that off. You usually find if you don't cut the end of the double-sided tape that it comes apart a little bit easier. Sometimes if you cut it with a pair of scissors and it's straighter, it's much more difficult to get off. Okay. There we are. Right, that's going to stay in place. Now, to attach my D-rings, I peel off one end, my D-ring through, and fold that down, which now can attach to my double-sided tape. Let's make sure that's lined up nicely. Do the same on the other end. Ooh. Attach that, fold that down, folding it down about 1 inch. Now I'm just going to double check that both sides are the same, and it needs to be 2.5 centimeters from the edge. So let's roll that down a bit further. 2.5 centimeters is 1 inch. That's that one. Just double check this one. 2.5. Fold that a little more. So now I'm going to take this across to the sewing machine, and I'm going to stitch a box all the way around the length, being really careful as I come across past my D-rings, making sure that I don't get too close to the metal D-ring as I sew past. And for this I'm going to use a 3.5mm stitch length because I'm top stitching it in place. So now, to save me the hassle later on of switching out my thread again and going between red and black, I'm actually going to do a decorative stitch on the crossbody strap while I'm here and while the red thread is in there, and then I don't have to worry about it later. So I'm going to replicate exactly what I've done on the gusset, and I'm just going to do a 3.5mm stitch length, 1/8 of an inch from the edge, for the complete length of the crossbody strap. So taking my zipper tape with my zip pull attached already, I'm going to take my zipper tab right side down, so they're right sides together, clip that in place. If, like me, you've got some little threads there, you can snip those off, or you can burn it with a lighter. Same on the other side, right side down. So I'm going to take this to the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew across the end of the zipper tab with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, which is about 5 or 6mm. And then when I've done that, I'm going to flip back the zipper tab, and I'm going to stitch a top stitch across the edge with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance to hold those in place. I'm going to do that on both ends. So we've got our zipper. I'm going to have it closed on the left and open on the right. And this is my back outer pocket, which is pattern piece D. I'm using the outer fabric, not the lining for the moment. Now, it does say in the pattern that your zipper tape may overhang a little bit. Mine actually is perfect. So it may be perfect, it may not line up right. Really, it's going to depend on your stitching here as to whether or not you have an overhang. If you have, it's absolutely fine, don't worry. I'm just going to find the center of this. Just do a little snip, so as I know where it is. I'm going to find the center here also. Again, tiny little snip, just a little bit out of it. So I want my zip open, closed on the left, open on the right. Put that right. So I want this right side down. Okay, and I'm going to line up these 2 center points and clip them in place. Now for me, mine lines up really, really well. If yours doesn't, and you have got an overhang, make sure you find the center points. That way your zip tabs will be even on both sides. Now I'm going to take this across the sewing machine, and I'm going to baste across this top edge with an 1/8 inch seam allowance with a really long stitch length just to hold it in place. Okay, so it's basted on. Now, so with this piece right side up, so we're looking at the back of the zipper tape, I'm going to take my lining fabric and place it right side down on top. Oh, lots of fluff. Right side down on top, and I'm going to clip that in place. You might want to move your zipper pull out the way as you go across. Remember also to pull your zipper pull out of the way when you're stitching. Anything with a zip, keep that out of the way. So now I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine, and I'm going to stitch across the top with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, when I've done that, back stitching well beginning and end, I'm going to flip this up. So we've got wrong sides together, and then I'm going to top stitch across this edge with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, 3.5mm stitch length to hold those two together. So we're taking our pattern piece E, which is the back lining, and we can have that right side up. I'm going to take our other panel that we've just stitched with our zip, also right side up. Okay, and join those two together, and we're going to clip those in place. Okay, so just right side up, clipped in place. Okay, and then we're going to stitch across the top here, just basting it into place with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so that's basted into place. Let's see, we've got, okay, that's what this should look like. So now we're going to take the front flap, which is pattern piece A. I'm going to put these two right sides together, lining up the top edge here with the top edge of the zipper. I'm going to clip those in place. And we're going to sew across this top edge with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, making sure that we move this zipper pull out of the way as we go. So make sure you start with it somewhere in the middle so you know it's out of the way, and then move it. Make sure you keep feeling for it as you're sewing along. Okay, so now we're going to flip this up out of the way, and we're going to top stitch across this top edge, making sure that this piece here folds down. So I've brought in my lining, this is pattern piece F, and I've made a mark, which I hope you can see. Sorry, the sun's starting to come in now. I've made a mark here, which is on the pattern piece, and this is for the magnetic snap. So I'm going to take my washer, place that over there. I'm going to use my marker. Now this is an air erasing marker, so mark my two little lines. And hopefully you can see those. Take my seam ripper. You can do this with a seam ripper, you can do it with a craft knife, whichever you prefer. If you're using a seam ripper, make sure you're really careful. You don't want to go too far. Always better to make the hole smaller and then increase it rather than the other way around. Once it's made it's too big, that's it. So I'm going to take the male part of my washer, that's the thinner one, sorry, male part of my snap, the thinner one, and put that through the holes that I've made, just flip that over, and just going to make two little holes in some spare Decaville that I happen to have. Just gives it a little extra support because obviously the fabric is quite thin. Two, put my washer on. I'm going to bend those out. Now if you wanted you could put some tape or something over here, but mine's actually going onto the outer which already has Decaville on it, and I'm using cork, so mine will be okay. If you're using something like quilting cotton you might need to cover that. Right, let's bring back our outer. So now we've got the lining and the completed outer that we did earlier, and we're going to put these right sides together. Make sure they're up the right way. So this is the bottom half with the zip, and this is the top half, which is the flap. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to clip around the top half only until we get to these points here. Okay, so starting here on this corner, I'm going to stitch around the flap edge only. So I'm not stitching close this edge, this is staying open. So all the way around using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. 1/4 inch is about 5 or 6 millimeters. Starting and stopping at the points of the curve. Okay, let's just trim those threads. Now we're just gonna cut into the curve just to help that turn through a bit better. I'm just going to trim this down a little bit. I did go a little bit over. So don't trim it down too much because it is only a 1/4 inch seam allowance. It's not a huge seam allowance on this pattern. And then we're going to turn this right side out. So let's push all that through. It's easier if you push the cork through as opposed to pulling it. Use your things inside here just to smooth out along the seam. Okay, and roll the seam. And you can clip that in place if you've got a thicker fabric like I have, or if you're using something like a quilting cotton, you could take this to the iron. So I've only clipped this side, I'm going to do the other side as well. So starting at this curved corner here, I'm going to top stitch all the way around that flap, again leaving open this end. So we're not stitching past these corners here, we're just going to top stitch around the top edge with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, 3.5 millimeter stitch length. So moving on to pattern piece C, which is the front slip pocket, I've transferred the marks from the pattern piece onto my exterior of the bag, and I'm going to install the other part of my magnetic snap. So that's this on here. I'm using a pen, mainly so as you can see it, but also when you're working with cork, it's a little bit easier. Take my seam ripper. Be really careful. Don't want to go too far. Oh, the washer's sticking to it. Other piece of paper. Oh, spare piece. Just going to cut that round. I find it doesn't show so much if you make it round. Sometimes if you have the corners there. Let's just make some little holes. Ooh. Okay. Sure. There we go. And that's installed. Now if you want, you can put something across the back here just to stop this from rubbing on your lining fabric. I don't want anything too bulky, so I'm just going to use a little bit of this double-sided tape, and I'm not actually going to take the tape off the back of it, I'm just going to leave it like that. And that should keep it safe. Bringing in my lining fabric, I've got my outer right side up. I'm going to put my lining right side down, and I'm going to clip across this curved edge. When I've done that, I'm going to take it across the sewing machine, and I'm going to stitch across that top curved edge only. I'm not stitching the rest of it, just this edge, with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, using my scissors, I've just snipped into the edge of this curve. I'm going to turn it wrong sides together, roll that seam so we get a nice edge, clip that in place. Now that I've done that, I'm going to top stitch across this top edge with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, 3.5 millimeter stitch length. There we go. So there were some little corners here that I've trimmed up. That's that all top stitched into place. So next we're taking our two outer bag body pieces. I've got the front pocket, which we've just stitched, which we're going to place on here. And then we're bringing back our outer that we stitched earlier. So we're going to line up the bottom edge and the sides for this one and this one. Okay, this one might be a little bit more fiddly because there's a few more layers on this one, and I'm going to clip those in place. Once I've clipped them, I'm going to baste into place just around the bottom edges and the sides for this one up as far as this curved edge, the same as we did before. And there we are, so that's basted on, just look like this. And then this one as well is basted all the way around. Okay. Right side up. Okay. There we go. Okay, so we're going to move on to putting the bag exterior together, and before I do that I want to put some rivets just into this strap here, into the gusset, just because, I mean, it's stitched down really, really well, but I just feel a little bit happier if I had a rivet here. So it's fairly easy for me because obviously this is a narrow strap, so trying to find the centre on this is quite simple, but if you wanted to, you could just take a ruler and just measure halfway. I'm actually going to put mine about there and do the same on the other side. There, just eyeball that. Take my hole punch. I've got the 2mm, I think it's a 2mm hole there. Right, just put that through, squeeze. Okay, it's gone right the way through. And this one. Squeeze. There we are, my rivets. Now these are actually bronze rivets. I didn't have any brass ones, but they're fairly close in colour, so I'm okay with that. Just paste through. Just put the back on it. One. Back on that. There we are. Right, let's bring in my rivet press. Make sure the base of that is sitting in well. Just that down. And this one. There we are, 2 rivets. Okay, so we're going to put that outer together. So I've got my 2 exterior pieces that we've already sewn, and I've got my gusset piece as well. So we've already found the centre of the gusset. I'm going to find the centre bottom of the 2 outer panels. Okay, so just fold in half. Just make sure that's correct. Squeeze there. Take my chalk marker. Okay, I'm marking within the seam allowance, so I don't have to worry about rubbing it off later. Okay, that's there. Same with this one. Mark the centre. Okay, so I'm going to start with this one first because I feel like this one might be the more difficult one when it comes to the machine. If I get that out of the way while I've got manoeuvrability, I think it'll be easier. And obviously this one's quite a bit lighter and so should be easier. So put this one to one side for the moment. And we're just working on the back one. So I've got my center points marked. I'm going to put these right sides together, lining up the center points at the bottom. Okay, so those 2 are lined up, clip that in place. Now I'm going to clip all the way around to join these up. Now, if we look carefully at these corner curves, they are pulling a little. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some scissors and we're just going to snip into this corner curve just to make it a little easier while we're sewing around. I'm just going to cut into this gusset piece only. I'm not cutting all the way through. If I push this down, you'll see that now that will spread around that corner so much better. Allows it to spread out. Okay, let's try the same on this one. See, at the moment it's struggling, wants to stand up. Oops. There we go. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to baste around the edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then I'm going to go back round at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now there's two reasons for doing that. Firstly, because if I do it an 1/8 of an inch first, I can get rid of all these clips and it means I can sew a little bit more freely going around these curved edges. And it also means that if my stitching, especially around these curves, isn't quite right, I can then neaten it up the second time round. There we are, so that's all stitched in place all the way around. I'm quite happy with that. Those tiny little snips all the way around really help, especially when you're working with something quite thick like cork. And you'll see I did the 2 rows of stitching. So you've got this one and then the next one further in. That goes all the way around. Happy with that. Now we're going to do exactly the same thing on this side. So we're going to bring back our other outer panel. Still got our center points marked. In here, line those up. Clip in place. Little snips just to help that ease into place. There we are, so that's all stitched together. All the way around. Double stitched again. Same as the first time. So that's our exterior. Now we're going to do exactly the same thing with the lining. So here are the lining pieces. We've got the 2 outer and the gusset. So I'm going to do exactly the same as before. I'm going to find the center point of my gusset piece, top and bottom. Find the center points of the bottom of my 2 bag outer pieces, or 2 bag lining pieces for the outer sections. Now, you have a choice as to how you want to turn this bag through. You can either do a drop-in lining. There are instructions for a drop-in lining there. You can create the lining zip pocket, which then means you can turn through the zip pocket and close up and nobody will be able to see anything. For today, I'm going to try, we'll see what happens, and I'm going to leave a gap here at the bottom in my gusset to try and turn through my gusset. Now this may or may not work, we'll see what happens. I will need to leave quite a large gap because I'm using cork and it's quite thick, which means it makes it a little difficult to turn things through, but we're going to give it a go. Let's see what happens. One lining panel, gusset piece, right sides together, lining up the center points, which are There. Clip that in place. Because I'm going to leave this section open, I've got a red clip here, just as I come around the curve, and I'm going to swap out this purple one with a green one. Okay. So this is my red stop, green go. That always reminds me that I need to stop here, backstitch really well to keep that closed, and then I have to jump over to green, backstitch really well, and then I can continue on, and then I don't forget that I need to leave a turning gap because I do that all the time. So I'm going to take my scissors, snip into the corners on the gusset, the same as we did before. Let's stitch that in place. There we go. So I've done both of them now, 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I've left a turning gap on one side, not on the other side, just on the one side, so as I can pull my bag through. So let's bring it back our exterior. Now we're going to put these two pieces together. So I need my lining wrong side out as it is, and my outer we're going to turn the right way out. So push this through. It is quite tough because it's cork, as I said before, and obviously with that Decaville as well makes it a little more challenging, but we can do this. Now we get to see what it looks like. Now is the time to check if you've got any creases, any little tucks, anything that maybe isn't quite right. Push out those corners, just check everything. Actually, I'm quite happy with that. Just push out this side. Okay, just check everything. Right, so now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move this zipper pull to the middle. And then I know I'm not going to sew over it, so I know that's out of the way. The next thing I'm going to do is this flap here. We're going to tuck inside, we've got a little hidden pocket here, we're going to tuck that in there. Okay, maybe roll it up as best you can and tuck that in there. So we're not tucking it inside the bag, we're tucking it inside this little hidden pocket at the back here. Okay, move that out of the way because we do not want to sew over it. I've got this top edge free because this is where we're going to be stitching now. Also going to fold down the D-rings that are on the edge. Okay, so now we're going to fit the outer inside the lining. Okay, now it might be a little bit cozy. It's okay. We're just going to squish it down a bit. Okay, it does not matter what's happening at the bottom of your bag. We're working with the top. So long as the top is okay, that's all we're worried about. Right, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to line up these gusset edges. So there's one, clip that, there's the other one. Okay. Now if I pull, you'll see that it should just sit nicely, and then I can just clip the rest of the top. Now we're going to top stitch around this top edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, but as before I'm going to go round and do an 1/8 of an inch first, and then I'm going to go back round and do the 1/4 inch afterwards, just so as I've got a little bit extra security and so as I can make sure that my stitching is nice and neat. Okay, so that's stitched again twice around the top. Now let's try and turn this bag through. We'll see what happens. So we've got our turning gap here. I'm going to scrunch in the cork bag in the middle, and then try and pull it through. Actually, that's not too bad. There we go. Straight through. How easy was that? Let's push out all these corners, make it nice and neat. There we are. So around here, all the way around. There we go. Okay. Let's just double check our stitching. We're happy with that. Right, now we're going to close up this bottom piece. I'm going to put my fingers in here and pull. Okay. And by doing that, it automatically folds in my two edges. Okay, I'm going to clip that in place. Okay, I'm going to swap out my thread for a nice yellow one, and I'm just going to stitch across this bottom edge here, closing up our turning gap. So just before I do that, I'm actually going to push this inside. Get that in out of the way. Oh, extra bit of fluff there, snaking through. Right, push this through. I'm going to roll the seam. Okay, keeping this flap tucked in still, we haven't taken that out. I'll just keep that tucked in out of the way. Right, so keeping this flap tucked in out the way, I'm going to continue with my clips all the way around, and then I'm going to do a top stitch around the top edge here, 1/8 of an inch from the edge, and that will keep our lining nice and neat and tidy inside. When I've done that, I'm going to swap out my thread, and I'm going to close up the bottom of the bag. There we are, so that's closed up at the bottom, top stitched around the top. I've turned everything through. Now this flap needs a little bit of an ironing, so because obviously the cork is a bit creased. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it to the iron. I'm just going to iron this side of the flap, and then that will sort out that cork on the other side. So just a nice medium heat iron, and then that won't be a problem at all. So what we've got left to do is attach our strap. Now, put that over to the side, bring back our strap that we had at the beginning. So remember, this is the 40-inch strap, which was just over 100 centimeters, just over a meter. I think it's like 101 point something, but a meter will be absolutely fine. I've got my 2 lobster clasps here. I've got some clips, and I'm going to use my rivet press. So the first thing I need to do, I need a ruler and I need my chalk marker. And I'm going to check that I've got this the right way. Now, obviously, because mine's pre-made strap, I know that's the back because that's where it's been through. So take my lobster clasp, feed that on, feed that onto there, and fold it down about 5 centimeters, about 2 inches, I think. Where are we? It's just a little less than 5 centimeters. Clip that in place. 1, 2. I'm going to do the same on the other side. So check which is the back. This is the top. Feed that on there. Pull that through. About 5 centimeters. Let's just check. 5 centimeters is 2 inches. There we go. Clip that in place. Okay, so sake, I'm just going to eyeball this. I know that I want one of my rivets close to the end, okay, because I know that will hold it down. So there we go. And then the next one I want fairly close to my lobster clasp because I don't want that wiggling around too much. So let's have a look. Ooh. So they are spaced about an inch apart. Okay, you can see that. So it's 2.5 centimeters apart, which is about an inch. Clip that back into place. Bring in my hole punch. Making sure this is nicely lined up because we don't want it off center. Just put that there. Okay. Put in, squeeze. That's one. Again, making sure this is nicely lined up. Squeeze that. I push them through this way. I don't know why, I always like to put them through that way. I don't know if it's right or not. Okay, 1, 2. The caps for them. Oops. 1. 2. Take those off. Okay, bring in my rivet press. Make sure my lobster clasp is out of the way. 1. 2. And that's now not going to come undone. Right, let's do the other side. One, 2, and there we are. One finished As You Wish bag.